This is a 79 Series Landcruiser bonnet, and this here is not a 79 Series Landcruiser. So today I'm making a hybrid of the two cars and taking the 79 bonnet and grafting it into the GQ Patrol to make the ultimate GQ Patrol bonnet. We've got a lot of welding, a lot of grinding, and a lot of bodywork ahead of us, and we run the risk of potentially ruining two perfectly good bonnets. And yes, we've just finished painting the car, and now I'm going to be hacking into a perfectly good bonnet, ruining my fresh paint job, but that's just what we have to do in order to achieve this, and I think at the end this is going to be worth it.
Proudly supported by Superior Engineering, Diesel Conversions Australia, and in part by...
Firstly, let's talk about options with bonnet scoops. Now, this is obviously a steel bonnet. This is straight off a 79 Series Landcruiser. There is actually fiberglass options out there. Now, if it's a whole fiberglass hood, I don't know about them. I've actually never seen one. But with just the fiberglass scoops, what I have seen is that they tend to crack a lot. Now, we actually had one on the Bogan bus and it actually cracked as well. They just don't seem to like the heat and everything that Australia has. So a steel bonnet is a much stronger option because you're welding it in, you can strengthen everything up, and it's just like a factory bonnet was. Now this one here is a pre-DPF model, meaning that it has the smaller scoop on it. The 79s did come out with two style scoops. When the DPF came out in the 79, they made the scoop a lot bigger. It sits up a lot taller, does look a lot better, but it is a lot more expensive as well. So we've opted for this bonnet here. Now I picked this up for 300 bucks because it does have some damage on the front. So that's pretty cheap. We don't care about the damage at the front. We just care about the scoop section. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one. We need to get some measurements onto the bonnet so we can transfer them over to the other bonnet and find out exactly where we're cutting. There is two lips on this. So you've got the actual scoop itself, and then you've got this molded section that comes up a little bit on the sides. I actually do want that molded section on the side. It's going to make the bonnet sit up a little bit taller and look a little bit more aggressive. But if we can't work that, we will just be cutting the scoop section out and welding just the scoop onto the bonnet. Now, the first step is to take some measurements. The main thing that I want to find is the center so we can make sure the scoop is perfectly aligned. And then the other thing that I want is the footprint of the scoop itself so we know exactly where it's going to sit. Hey Siri, what's half of 1,423?
Is 711.5.
What's half of 1,413? It's half of 1,432.
32 is 716.
So now that I've got the center, the next step is to mark out exactly where I'm going to cut. Going to be using duct tape for that. Preferably you'd be using masking tape, but turns out don't have any, so duct tape it is. Right, I've got everything marked out where I need to cut to the inside of this tape line. You can see I'm picking up that first lump and then up to the bonnet scoop. So if we can make that first lump work, that would be cool. It's going to sit that up a lot higher and it's going to look a lot better. I'm going to be using an angle grinder. I'm going to go around and cut our marks out. There still is the framework underneath, but I'm just going to be going through the first layer to see if we can separate this scoop from the rest of the bonnet. Alright, that's cut. I'm now going to flip it over. Now there's a little piece in here that holds... There was a little piece in there that held the scoop in. It just fell out. Gonna have to remove that to get that out of the way. So the top skin is cut, which leaves the bottom exoskeleton, which is the framework that holds all the bonnet together. Now it's been glued on with automotive sealant, and I'm using a Sawzall blade with a bit of tape around it. Kind of looks like a prison shank, but it seems to be working all right. Just getting in there and cutting all the glue out so then I can drop down the scoop. All right, let's see if she's free. Ooh! Now we start the fun bit of putting this on that. So now that I've had a think, I know what I'm going to do. Rather than try to keep this factory curve, because it's going to be really hard to replicate that and keep that all, you know, bogged up and shape it all, I'm going to measure up from here and cut this nice and flat so that we're welding on top of this curve and not to the curve. I think that's going to be a lot easier rather than trying to recreate that curve. I'm going to chop up that a little bit more, see if we can get it sitting a little bit flatter, and then go from there. The other thing I'm battling a bit is the GQs have this indent here, so we need to be in front of that. I don't want to mess up that. At the back, there is that groove, which we're going to have to do some trickery to make it look factory, but I think this is all going to work quite well. And I'm really trying to just keep that extra hump in there just so it looks a bit more tough. So back to the drawing board and back to the grinder. I'm gonna get this cut up a little bit better and go from there. That, my guys, is much better. That's sitting real flat. So you can see I can just push that down and weld that in, butt it up. That's the go. Woo, that's looking good. I have found center on the bonnet, marked center onto the scoop, and you can see that it's perfectly lining up. Now around the back, I've done the same as well. So that's lining up quite nice. This is also going to be a little bit tricky to do this section. I think I'm gonna have to cut this out and fold it down and then re-weld it in so it kind of sits in there nice and flat. But as for the rest of the bonnet, you can see that looks absolutely amazing up there. So the next step is triple check the measurements. I'm gonna check square using this hole here and possibly the windshield washers. Then I'm gonna trace right around the outside and get the GQ bonnet cut out so then this can sit in there and get welded in. Perfectly square. That's what you want to see. Right, that's the top cut off, leaving us with the bracing. Now, you want to leave the bracing alone at the moment because if you cut the bracing out, the bonnet's going to become really weak and you don't want anything to move. So the next step is to make sure that the top fits into this gap. And if it does, we clean up all the edges, get it ready to weld in. Once it gets tack welded in, it'll give a lot of rigidity to the bonnet again. Then we can go ahead and sort the underneath out and get the other section cut out and tack weld it into here, which I'm not sure how I'm going to do yet, but we do need to do it. So I just want to make sure this fits in here before I commit to anything more. God, that is snug, which is good. God, that's perfect. Literally perfect. Now, I know on camera Ron Burgundy does look a little bit red, but look at the color difference between an actual red and the color that we've picked with Ron Burgundy. This is much darker, much more purple, much more burgundy. This is like a bright red, but still a nice color. Don't mind it at all. To remove the paint, I'm going to be using a paint strip wheel. These are a lot better so you don't get the sanding marks in the paint. So I'm going to go around the perimeter with this, and then when I'll take this off, I'll deburr all the inside, get it ready to get the welder out and start tacking this thing in. After 1,000,001 tack welds, I am finally done with welding the top on. Now, unfortunately, it's dark outside because that took way too long. So I will be back tomorrow to finish this off with the grinding and the rest of the bracing underneath. Okay, wave bye. Wave bye-bye. Okay, blow kiss. Okay,
Kiss the camera.
It is now the next day, and as you can see, I've got the bonnet all sanded back and all the welds ground down nice and flat. Now, it's not perfect. I can feel a few ripples in it, which means that we've had some warpage with the heat. For the most part, it stayed pretty straight. It's just a few little divots here and there, and we'll be able to adjust all that with the body filler. Now, if you can see on the camera here, there's no support underneath this bonnet. There's nothing holding that steel up, which is where this support used to press on the bottom on all these tabs. So I'm gonna have to cut this out and somehow make it work and sit up under there. The other thing is this middle scoop piece that fits in there requires a piece of steel that is still underneath this bonnet support. So in order to get this center piece in, we do need to put that support under anyway. So I'm gonna flip this upside down and try and have a look. I'll then probably cut a good section out of the bonnet bracing up on the 79 bonnet. Then I'll see if I can go ahead and graft it into our new bonnet. But I've trimmed that down quite a fair bit, so hopefully this is going to fit in here quite nicely now. Roughly goes about there. It actually fits quite nice. I think this is really going to work quite well. But what I need to do is trim out the middle section so I can get the scoop fitted in, because the scoop will center it where it needs to go. Then we can start adjusting and cutting. So I'll take a big chunk out of the middle and get that fitted up. Get that in the center, but I think it's gonna work. I've got the middle part of the scoop fitted in. You can see that plastic piece in there. That is centering up the bracing in here. Now, obviously we've got a huge gap here. So what I'm thinking is about just folding this down and tacking it on there. So I've just got to go around, make the cuts where they need to be. So you can see everything is going to tack on. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be braced enough to hold the rigidity in the bonnet. Now, I did have to cut a few extra pieces to make this look a lot neater. So you can see we're kind of following the existing lines that the 79 had. So it kind of almost looks factory. And I say almost, don't get feisty in the comments now. There is probably a few ways to do what we've just done, but I feel like that is a good way and it's nice and strong. Now, I'm not just gonna leave it like that. I'm gonna be using Sikaflex to go over all of the welds so they kind of just look like a seam rather than a weld. It'll kind of incognito the bonnet so it looks a lot more factory. Now I'm using Sikaflex 227. I just got it from Bunnings, but I forgot to grab the pointy thing, so it's gonna get a little bit messy. I'm just gonna smear it out with my finger. And if you haven't used this stuff before, it is very messy, so be prepared with rags and gloves. Right, I've done all the gaps, bloody messy job, didn't do a very good job, actually did a very bad job, but the gaps are full. Now what that sealant is going to do is take up the room between the top skin and the frame, and it's going to strengthen everything up and make it so the top has a bit more rigidity. Now I do have to let that dry, which means that I am going to end the episode here and do a 2-part series on this bonnet, just because there is obviously so much work. We've still got all the bog work, we've still got the paint and a few other bits and pieces to do, which means that it's going to take way too long for one episode. Now thanks for watching me cut the best and only good part off a Land Cruiser and mold it into the Patrol bonnet. I shall see you guys in the next episode. Be there or be square.